What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Guerraindawn show. Today we have a little spooky interview for you all in a few minutes with Craig Owens as we talk about our paranormal experiences and if we truly believe or not. When the interview starts, y'all are going to see that this was a little while ago, and by the time this episode releases, he would already be on set of the new season of Haunted Discoveries, where he uses history and facts to see if the paranormal could really exist. But before we get to that, we have two segments for you today. First one, we're going to be answering a random question. And today, that question is going to be, do you prefer cats or dogs? Now, when you ask me that, that's kind of a lot of people say dogs. That's a very common thing for people to say. But when it comes to me, I actually may prefer the cat. Actually, no, I'm going to go dog. I'm going to go dog, but I find cats to be more interesting than dogs. But because of what happened to me yesterday, I was in my car and I was trying to get out. It was around 12 o'clock. It was midnight, basically. I was trying to come back into my house, but there was a skunk right next to my door. And I was looking at the skunk and I looked up and I realized my cat was on top of the truck next to me, just staring at me. It didn't help me. The cat never helps me. No, it just stares at me all the time. Doesn't really care what's going on. But I know my dog would have gone after that skunk and gotten it out of the way. So I'm going to go with dog. Next segment today, we are going to rant for 30 seconds. And my rant today is actually going to be about the San Antonio traffic because I cannot stop talking about it. It is ridiculous. It's honestly ridiculous. The traffic, especially by 1604, has just been horrendous. It's been out of this world. And don't even get me started at night. All of a sudden we close I-10 and we don't tell anybody about it. I get off work like at 10 something and I'm starting to drive. And I always look at the maps, I'm like, 18 minutes. That's like how long it takes for me to go without any traffic. So it's like 22 minutes plus 5, it's red and it says plus 5. And I get on the highway, I start going, and all of a sudden I'm there for an hour. I didn't know plus 5 was an hour. Why is maps lying to me? Why is my phone acting like it's not going to be next to me the whole time? We're just telling lies. Makes no sense. And they think they can get away with it. My anger is really getting to the brim on this. But anyways, I've been ranting for too long. Let's go ahead and get to that interview with Craig Owens. Like I said before, you're going to see a little bit of a difference between the background, because this was a while ago. But let's get spooky. Don't get too scared now. Let's get straight into it. What's up, guys? Welcome back. My name is John Guetta. This is Cold Topic, and today I am here with
Craig Owens.
It's nice to have you on. I see you're rocking a nice fedora.
That's
So,
my style. That's my style. There's a story behind the fedora, but basically when I don't wear it and I go out and do anything paranormal, someone always mentions where's the fedora. So I feel like I'm kind of locked into wearing one now.
yeah, it really plays into it. Seems like a very key role.
It
So,
does. It separates me from the pack a little bit. Yeah.
yeah. So, are you gonna hold it like back here like this? Is that comfortable? Like holding your like headphones back?
No, I've done podcasts like this. It's fine. It's fine, really. It makes me feel kind of like vintage, like those old time radios where they're going,
Well,
control tower to such and such.
like you're calling in.
Yeah, exactly.
So I asked that question because I actually have one here with me, and I was gonna, get a little, let's get into it kind of thing. So
Do it.
it's a little older. I've had this
Uh-huh.
since I was like really little. So we're gonna see
Uh-huh.
how it looks on me. Let's see how we looking.
Oh, terrific, man. Terrific. It's a
Looking good.
little it looks a little like, is it 1980s style?
Yeah, yeah, going
It
back a
looks
little
kind
bit.
of look like the kind that Michael Jackson used to rock,
There we go. That's
and
why I got it.
is that it? Yeah.
Yeah, I was real big
Yeah.
on Michael Jackson.
Yeah, he sported it for a while and whatnot. What actually inspired the fedora is, and this goes right into why I do what I do, is that I started out taking like vintage style photos in haunted places, and so I would dress models up in like 1920s, if it's a 1920s haunting, 1920s building, 19 teens, dress them up in 19 teens, and we'd shoot and run an investigation in the haunted sections of various hotels. So when my book came out called Haunted by History Volume 1, a production company immediately contacted me and they signed me to a 1 year contract to develop a show based on the book. And so it was actually their idea to, because of the vintage photography, to actually say, you were wearing a suit and a hat in one of your photos. You should wear that, for the sizzle reel that we're doing. And then they were saying, you should wear that for when you do book signings and whatnot. So I did, because it's a visual of kind of the photography that I did in these haunted locations that appear in the book, even though when I took the pictures, I didn't dress vintage at all. It's not practical, but as a person that has to put himself forward in order to market himself in the book, I did that, and it just took off. And it's kind of funny. I'm based out of Los Angeles now, and every now and then someone will send me something, and there's some tour guide somewhere that's dressing like me in Los Angeles doing tours, and it's like, oh, okay, I get it. you know,
Yeah.
Copy is a kind of a form of flattery.
So a question now, let's get this started with this question here. So
Okay.
what was the real moment? Because I know you said that you never wanted to believe.
Right.
So when was the
Well,
moment? Oh, you're good.
I might have said I never wanted. Let me just phrase it this way. I grew up kind of in the South for a while before I ended back in Texas. I was born in Odessa, Texas, and we moved to various parts. And one of the places I lived in was Mississippi, and on an Air Force base in Columbus. And my parents made friends with a family that owned an antebellum home in West Point, Mississippi, and it was called Waverly. Um, and I used to go there and play a lot because the Snows, the family that owned it, had a little boy that was a couple of years younger than me. So I was about 5 years old. And it was a 3-story antebellum mansion, and used to play on the grounds. But then I overheard my parents talking about a little girl ghost that was seen there. And oh boy, that piqued my interest at 5, 6 years old. So I would go over there and I'd start looking for the little girl ghost. And I never really encountered her, although I did get scared during one sleepover at the house and had my parents come and take me home. But I can't tell you that I saw or heard anything. I just woke up with a terrifying feeling. So I never encountered the girl ghost. And then as I grew up I was like a good student in school. I studied philosophy. I studied very logical minded, going into college, studying different subjects. And so I started to waft between non believing and believing. And so at times, was very dismissive of the paranormal. And other times, I kind of, something weird would kind of happen, and I can't quite explain it when I try to use logic to refute it. And at times I was actually did dismiss paranormal activity based on other things. I rationalized it away. Either it was, my overactive imagination was a favorite of mine that I used to use. Oh, I'm tired. It's the workload and juggling work with school. Oh, I had to break up with my girlfriend and I'm not feeling quite right. You can make up all kinds of excuses for weird things happening, right? But then you start meeting people that are also in the same space and they're encountering it and they don't have the same baggage that I've got. And it made me realize, hey, maybe there is something to it. But in the 80s and 90s, they didn't have like good ghost hunting standards or principles. So, if you wanted to connect, the best way to do it back then was to go to a psychic fair and have your tea leaves read, or consult a psychic who will tell you what they feel. And that was very unsatisfactory for me as a kid and even young adult. It did not match my logic of on the conditions that I needed to believe. So after getting numerous bogus readings, meeting fake psychics, and things like that, I started leaning much more toward not believing. Then I moved to LA, and weird things started happening sometimes around me in LA. And so it started piquing my interest, but I was also very much an old Hollywood person. So I loved going to these old locations, and I loved going and exploring and hearing all the legends and checking to see whether they're true or not. I probably repeated a lot of urban legends back then. In fact, I know I did. But ultimately, I started. There are just a few things that happened that made me kind of decide, well, if it, like at Warner Brothers, I was working as a script PA at Warner Brothers Studio, and nothing ever happened to me except one night. And I had got called in early, and I had gone in and made the scripts for the cast and crew and the producers and everybody. And it's a big routine, and I did it all by myself. And so the sun was just sinking, and I was going to the sound stage to drop off about 50 scripts for the next day's rehearsal. And as I walked in and I flicked on the work lights because it was pitch black in there, the work lights were acting really funny that night. They were just strobing, and they weren't like behaving like they normally do. And so if you hear a train, I'm by a train track,
Oh, you're good.
by the way. Okay. So, I started going up these rickety stairs to some upper floor offices to drop off scripts, and that's when I started noticing, hearing a woman's voice talking. And I can't make out what she's saying. It's just like gibberish. You can make out sound consonants, you can make out vowels, but you can't. There's nothing there to string it together to where there's a coherent message of any kind. And so I just stood there and I thought, someone's pulling a prank on me. And I thought, okay, who would know me? Who would do this? Where's this coming from? So back then we had pagers. This is 1999. So I just kind of looked at my pager and go, I'll give it 20 minutes, to see if this is someone left a radio behind or it's a radio tuned somewhere on the set, because something's got to go to a station ID if it's an FCC regulated radio station that I'm hearing, or a walkie talkie. There's going to have to be a squawk at some point. And this voice was a female voice. It was kind of deep, and it was raspy a little bit, like maybe a middle-aged woman or something, or someone that really loved gin, And it kept moving around, and I never could pinpoint where the sound was coming from down below. And the lights are still strobing. They never turned on the way they were supposed to. So it had this kind of Steven Spielberg poltergeist thing going, where it was just strobing lights. And I'm listening to this woman. And after 20 minutes, I finally said, I got to get back to work. I can't just sit here all night trying to figure this out. I still thought the possibility that this was a big orchestrated prank, but I thought, well, I'll try to tiptoe down the stairs as quietly as I can and see if I can sneak up on whatever it was. So I get down halfway down the stairs and I stop, and I still hear the voice. So I go, this is good. I'm halfway down. So I sneak down to the bottom of the stairs, and just as I hit the bottom of the stairs, no voice. So I went through the routine of going through the studio looking for a walkie-talkie or a radio. Nothing, just nothing was going on. The atmosphere was very thick, and I was feeling. You ever get that feeling when you go to a place where it doesn't have to be paranormal or not, but you walk into a room full of people or in an empty space, and it's like you don't belong here. You want to get out. That's the way it felt. And this is a soundstage I've been at 2, 3 in the morning, not at 5:30, feeling this way. It's unnatural. So I decided, I'm just going to drop the rest of the scripts on the table, and I'm going to leave. And as I'm leaving, I start hearing the sound of woman's heels and the swishing of a dress walking behind me. And so I thought, this is a prank. I'm going to get him. So I stop and I do what I call my gunslinger spin around to catch whoever it was behind me, right? No one there. And then it stopped. The footsteps stopped, not in sync with mine. The footsteps were never in sync with mine, but they were close. So it'd be like a little stutter step, as if someone really were following and trying to mime you, And so it got quiet, no sound of footsteps. So I turned back and start walking again. This was a large sound stage. And once again, after about 2-3 steps in, I start hearing the clacking of heels and the swishing of a dress. And it sounded like whoever was behind me was at least 15 feet. It wasn't far away. It was relatively close. So I actually get to an open part of the soundstage where there's nothing anyone could hide behind. It's just wide open space. And then I do my gunslinger turn again. Nothing there. But again, it's like a little half stutter step, and then it stops when I stop. That was enough for me. I just quickly bolted from the thing. I stayed outside and I had a cigarette for, I had like maybe 2, 3 parked. And I had parked my little golf cart so I could see both sides of the doors of the soundstage, because I kept thinking in my mind, someone's going to walk out and I'm going to bust them. But no one ever came out of that stage. Now, years later, I run into a security guard at Warner Brothers who had been working there for like 20 years. And I started saying, I need to tell you the story. And so I started telling him the story, and he guessed the sound stage before I could even finish. And said, yeah, other people have had experiences there too. Now, here's the O. Henry twist to this, because there's always an O. Henry twist to a lot of ghost stories, is that the next day after that incident, I was pretty shaken up. It had me, my adrenaline was going all through the night and then even after work. And so the next day I tried to break it to my supervisor, what had happened. And he didn't want to hear it. It's like, but see, no one would believe me because this happened on Halloween night in 1999. And it never happened in any other time. It just happened on Halloween night. And so no one believed me. And that's also why I thought it was a prank. And no one ever no one ever fessed up to it. I don't know who would go through that much work to try to scare a lowly script PA, just trying to do his job. The reason why I was even brought in early is because it was Halloween and everyone went home to go trick-or-treating and go to parties. So who's going to stick around and play with this, low-level employee at the studio? But that was a story. But see, the point why I'm even telling you this story is that these are the little building blocks that led me to ultimately become a believer. But I was very hurt that no one would take my story seriously at the time because of Halloween. So that made me realize that I need to find some way to document this kind of activity, because word of mouth only goes so far. Either you believe me or you don't. So fortunately, paranormal investigations began to take off in the mid 2000s with Ghost Hunters, I think, is the one that really started it. And what I really liked about what they did is that they did not use psychics back then at all. They used other equipment, some better than others, but they did introduce the voice recorder. And so I grabbed a bunch of them. And so if I encounter any voices, I'm going to record it, And so I did eventually, not at Warner Brothers, but, doing vintage photography. I was doing a completely different project. It was for a film project I had in mind, and I needed a 1920s building. So I picked the Mission Inn. Gave me permission to shoot. Mission Inn is in Riverside, California. It's this fabulous, weird building that's over 100 years old. And I did take a recorder. I had heard that it was haunted, so I just took one just in case. But where I was shooting and where I was staying was not on anybody's online list of haunted locations or haunted rooms. But sure enough, after shooting there, weird things started happening inside that suite, and that's when I broke out the recorder and caught a voice. And from that moment on, it was off to the races.
So, do you feel fear in those kind of moments, or is it kind of like you got to the point where you're able to settle down, like kind of take it more as just a person being there?
Well, I'm kind of unflappable. I've kind of grown unflappable. I will say that there are moments where I have been unnerved. Yes. At the Mission Inn, um, I just said I caught a voice, but that was also the first time I had seen an apparition, too. Now, I had caught the voice a couple of nights before I saw an apparition. And the apparition was what they call a shadow figure. And it was peeking, or the story I tell is that, I was doing a photo shoot, everything was going wrong. I was tired, and I was felt, even though I was in this $1,000 a night suite, that's supposed to be where Richard Nixon was and all these movie stars and stuff, I couldn't stand being in there alone. There was just something about it, and no matter how much light I kept shining in that room, it was too gloomy, And so I was getting very frustrated. And so my phone rang about midnight. And so I went out into the courtyard. This was on the upper floor, the fourth floor of the Mission Inn. And I took the phone call, and I'm just like going, do we have, I'm talking to someone, and I'm trying to just say, look, it's been like, I can't wait to get back home. It's like I'm really tired. It's been an amazing adventure, but I just can't get any shots tonight. So after I get off the phone, 10-minute phone call, I'm walking back across the outdoor courtyard back into the suite, and something catches my eye out of the corner. So I turn and look, and it's just this open. Oh, the best way I can describe it, it's an open mouth tunnel like that. It's kind of rounded. When I say open mouth, it means you just walk right in, and then on the other side of the tunnel, there's actually a glass door that you can open and go inside the building. It's all brick, and there's lights hanging overhead. It's nighttime, so it casts like, it almost looks like a dungeon, with the lights and the brick and the rounded corners. There were no corners. And in this short hallway, there is a little side passage alcove that goes to 2 rooms, and then on the other side is a doorway that goes into a suite. So I'm like looking around, and I see the shadows and whatever, but I see this like 5'1", 5'1", 5'2". It looked like a shadow, but when I described the shadow, it looked shadow-like, but it looked like someone wearing like a toga or some kind of monk's friar thing. So it was somewhat shaped, but somewhat shapeless, at the same time. And I didn't think anything of it. I thought, oh, it's a shadow, So I'm like, I'm looking for a ghost. I'm looking for like something out of Ghostbusters, something blue and glowing and stuff, and shadows. So I'm looking, and I don't see anything. And so I start looking again, and I'm just like very methodically going, okay, lights casting shadow here, casting shadow there. And then I get back to the shadow again. I go, God, that shadow looks darker than the shadows on the bricks projected from the lights above. And just as I was thinking, what is causing that shadow? Because it looks like almost like a head. It almost looks like it's leaning out. It's blacker than black, but it looks very two-dimensional, height and width, no depth. and then suddenly, just as I thought that, and starts homing in on that shadow went around the corner, and I was a deer in headlights. At that moment, a little voice said, "Dummy, go look." So I probably stood frozen for about 3 seconds or 4 seconds, and then I went and looked, and I went down that alcove, and there were only two doors that it could have gone to. One later, through research, turned out to be a suite where a lot of paranormal activity had been found. And then the other door was to the bedroom that I was going to sleep in that night. So I walked in back, and the model looked, she was like, "Looks like you just saw a ghost." And, I was like, "I think I did just see a ghost." That rattled me. And I stayed up to like 4 in the morning because I was too afraid to go to bed. You know, could not believe my eyes, could not even rationalize how away what I saw, because it was shadow figures which I didn't believe in. I was like so certain that they didn't exist. And so, as you can imagine, I had to do some processing. I went home the next day, and my family was away, so I literally slept with the lights on for 10 nights at least. And I was asking everybody, "What's a shadow person? What's a shadow person? What's a shadow person?" And now I finally come to accept that shadow figures do exist. They're kind of rare to see. I have seen some since then at other locations, but it's very rare that I see them. But that was probably one of the scariest times I ever had. There was a hotel in Monrovia called the Aztec Hotel, and the basement used to scare me, and I would not go down there by myself. That was supposed to be a very haunted area, and so I never investigated by myself down there. In fact, it's a bad sign when you go down there and there's a little table with a candle and an open Bible.
Oh,
you know,
yeah, that's
that's a sign that someone certainly feels that it's haunted. When you see the religious stuff there and just kind of left out in the open. And so, and I would leave recorders on overnight there, and I'd have to go down there by myself in the mornings about 8:39 to turn them off and collect them. I would just make a beeline real fast, grab them, and get out faster than anything. But nowadays, I can go down to the basement by myself there, and it doesn't bug me. Now, either it's not as active or as scary as it was then, or I've just gotten used to things. But I do get excited when things happen in real time, but I don't necessarily get scared anymore. The feeling I mostly get is, "Well, that was weird. I want that to happen again," and then it never does. And so you're like literally left thinking, "Am I crazy? Did I just imagine this?" And you start being kind of like a dog chasing its own tail. And um, but fortunately, if you have recorders or if you have some other device that documents what you experience with your real senses, your human senses, then it helps a lot. So I always try to make sure that I have recorders going so that if I hear something and it's weird, that a recorder has picked it up.
so. Following that, I got two tales to tell you that have
Okay.
I've witnessed in my life. And I just want to hear your opinions on each of them.
Okay.
So, first one, I don't know if you have you been to San Antonio?
Yes.
Are you
The
familiar
Alamo is
with?
one of my favorites places in the
Yes,
world.
it's amazing. Have you ever heard or been to the Crockett Hotel?
That's close by, isn't it?
Yes, it's
Or
like right next to the Alamo. That's
okay. I haven't. Some of my family have been there. But tell me your story. I was such an Alamo fanatic as a kid. I read everything that they had at that time. So
I
tell me your
loved it.
story.
I was like, I was obsessed with Alamo growing up. So I stayed at the Crockett Hotel, right? And this was around. I got to the hotel 11 o'clock, 10:30 ish
Hmm.
p.m. I go in, Get into the room. The room's not that big, it's kind of small. The bed
Mm-hmm.
is in the corner of the room. And basically, you know how most hotels have like the little walkway and the restrooms right there, like almost like instantly
Okay.
right there?
Yeah.
Well, there was a restroom and it was facing the bed. So that night,
Okay.
I was laying down watching TV. And like you said earlier, you get that feeling that it's a feeling I'm sure a lot of people have felt that something is just not right. Like someone else, like there's something there, that eerie feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And I was having that almost the whole time I was there. And this was already knowing that everyone was saying that the Crocodile Hotel is haunted. Everyone basically says every hotel downtown San Antonio is haunted.
Right.
So I was there laying down, and constantly I just found myself turning and looking towards that restroom. And it was like just a feeling, something kept telling me to look.
Mm-hmm.
That uncomfort was there. I took a shower, got ready to go to sleep, closed the door, and I start laying down, tossing and turning. And I guess I fell asleep for a little bit. I wake up, I turn, and I just like feel such an uncomfortable feeling. And then I look at the restroom and I notice the door is not closed anymore and that it is slightly open, but like the way the crack is like it's facing me, like directly at me.
Right.
And this just like the feeling inside of me fully elevated. And for around probably 5 minutes was just me staring right at that restroom door and just like feeling like this very there's like an uncomfortable feeling that I've never felt before.
Yeah.
So that's basically the story. It's not as exciting as yours, but
Well, yeah, but you know what? In my experiences, um, I've learned to, I've had to fight myself with trusting your instincts because a lot of people that don't believe in ghosts, they try to tear it down by saying, oh, you can deceive someone with magic and sleight of hand. Your brain can play tricks on you, optical illusions and stuff like that. And to some degree, it's true, right? But we do have such a thing as called instincts, which is kind of a form of ESP. It's survival instincts. Sometimes you just know something's not right, and sometimes, like, my parents divorced when I was a kid, teenager, but I remember going home and walking into a room right after they had had a fight, not knowing that they had had a fight, but you could feel the tension of that fight still in the room, even though no one was in there. You just kind of, it's like, oh boy, there's like, and I don't profess to be psychic. I don't promote myself as psychic. I think that everyone has the possibility of feeling these emotions. That being said, to directly answer what I think might be going on is that we have it is survival instinct. Our conscious, you're looking consciously at that door. You're looking consciously toward that doorway, looking for something, and you're not seeing anything. That's like really until you fall asleep, wake up, and the door's slightly moved, right? But you're staring right before that, and you feel drawn to that door, right? It could be a possibility that your conscious is trying to figure out what your subconscious is telling you. And the subconscious, which I always feel like it's this mysterious part of the brain that we know that it does some things, but we don't know whatever it is. Some people believe it's the umbilical cord to higher knowledge, the higher power, God, if you want to call it that, and the prayers go through the subconscious. If you're into that, if you're religious, but or even if you're spiritual, you can go that way. But I think what happened was maybe what you were experiencing might have been your subconscious issuing a warning. Your conscious is trying to figure out, bring order to that feeling, trying to explain that feeling. You can't quite do it. And then when you fall asleep and wake up, then it's kind of like the reveal. Does that make any sense?
yes, like your mind is already trying to hint towards you that something is like
Yeah, it's the subconscious. That's why you're going, why is it scary? Why do I feel like I'm being watched? Why, does it feel heavy here? Why do I feel like, these are normal questions when some part of your brain is signaling a warning. And the conscious, your senses, your sight, your hearing, your smell and touch, it's trying to validate whatever that feeling is. It's a survival instinct. I mean, if you study psychology, it goes back to even like Neanderthal times. Back when that's all we had, and you had to listen for certain sounds, certain smells. That even though you may not be able to see, but there'd be danger in the brush. You know, you had this heightened sense, and a lot of animals have that, like dogs and cats have, and other animals still have this instinct, and humans do have it to some degree if you develop it. Um, you never can quite control it. You never can quite control psychic ability or ESP either. That's why it's never been able to be reliable from a scientific study point of view. It just kind of comes and goes, and and you might be hot at the betting table, at the gambling table one moment, one night, and then just go cold and lose everything. It's that way. It's just the way it works.
They do also say like with babies, because
Yeah,
what they would say is that since adults are so like so quick to cut things off, like you said earlier, we're like so quick to say, "Oh, well, that's not possible. This was the reason why that happened." Like the
yeah.
very kids, like even kids and babies, their mind doesn't think too far into things as much as adults do. So what they see, like what they think is happening, is what they instantly believe is happening.
Yes, and that there's a lot of stuff written about that. Some make sense, some less. So, I mean, I still consider myself a reluctant believer in the paranormal. I mean, at times I wish it. And here's what you probably heard me say or came across me saying: I wish that it didn't exist, just so that I could sound smart and by dismissing it all rationally, and with science. But it can't be done that way. I mean, I know that there are plenty of people that would argue against that, but what they're doing, well, if you take, some of the famous debunkers like James Randi, who would offer his $1 million challenge, and and you had people that followed him that were just so insistent, and they would call anybody that ghost hunts, oh, that's pseudoscience, that's pseudoscience. But then if you go back and like really analyze what they're saying, it doesn't make a lot of sense logically either, because doesn't all science kind of start as pseudoscience until it picks up steam and it's proven? So pseudoscience, they try to use it as an insult and a very patronizing term to dismiss whole swaths of beliefs and data that's collected. And it's an overgeneralization to begin with, so that's also a losing argument whenever anyone makes an overgeneralization. Um, so it's that, but then I've noticed that James Randi had used pseudoscience to refute pseudoscience, only he dresses his pseudoscience as science, but it's not. So when it comes to like really evaluating paranormal activity, yeah, there are parts of it that is 100% pseudoscience. I wish it weren't, but let's face facts here. It's paranormal because it's not normal. It's called paranormal. In order, if you want to follow the scientific principle of having things being repeated in a controlled setting at will, you're basically trying to force the paranormal to become normal in order for you to believe it. And then if you even follow the science circles, because I have a lot of friends that are scientists, and many of them believe in the paranormal, by the way, um, and you get them talking about this proving by repetition in a scientific setting they will argue that that's even a faulty way of testing things. There are many different ways that scientists um, try to test something, in fact. And maybe the repetition in a controlled setting is probably one of the most universally accepted. There are still people that argue that that doesn't work. And I actually believe that when it comes to trying to study things like the paranormal, that model does not work whatsoever. Therefore, we're not going to be able to prove it anything that way. So it's really interesting. I mean, I found a brilliant article by I think it was like a Harvard scientist that totally dismantles the proving by repetition argument. And it made perfectly logical sense. So I do think you just need to sometimes trust your own instincts. You have to do due diligence. Critical thinking skills are impeccable and necessary. I think you need to do the due diligence, but sometimes when you get that feeling, like with you in the door, and I think you need to trust your instincts a little bit more that maybe something is not right and it's your subconscious that's flagging it. It's just that your conscience can't identify it at that moment.
And that also could go with my mind in general, because I've never seen anything. So my
Yeah.
mind would never truly straight go to that, because in my like my formal mind, the way I believe is that that doesn't exist to like that part of my brain.
Mm-hmm.
So why would it
Mm-hmm.
instantly think that? And that
Right.
also follows something that I had read about once, how the reason why we think all that is so silly is because our minds were never meant to comprehend such a thing. Like how animals are. They may see it, but they don't know exactly what it is. And that's how we were supposed to be. And we have gained all this knowledge over time to where we were never supposed to know any of that kind of stuff. That was never supposed to be a natural thing for us to learn. So it's
Yeah.
so hard for our mind to comprehend it when it was never supposed to be a thing in the first place for us.
Well, it ties back to what you said about children being somewhat unfiltered. They're taught the programming that certain things don't exist, but children, you know, they don't know this when they come out. So, yeah, I do think that there's a sensitivity that they have, that many of them have, that we lose over time through, the programming that we get from society, from parents, from teachers, from peers, all of that stuff. And um, so when they're kind of unfiltered and new to the world, they don't know the rules. So yeah, I do think the veil, as some people call it, between the known and the unknown is a little bit more accessible to them. It's just too bad they can't really communicate what they
Yeah.
see or hear. But tons of stories of children, just babies, just laughing, and you could tell by the eyes and the pupil dilation, the iris, that they are definitely looking at something that's just not that much ahead of them, in front of them, and they're just laughing while they're pinpointing their attention at something that we can't see, and that has long mystified. It still mystifies psychologists and other scientific minded people that study human behavior and how the brain works. There's so much we don't know. We think we know, and science is continually changing. Certain some laws stay put, but I was even reading an article where they're talking about black matter and what they're finding out in space, and how things are kind of moving in a way that suggests that there's a new kind of physics on the horizon, and that maybe our current physics laws uh, are inadequate, and that we might have to reevaluate some of these laws, or add to these laws, because there are some things in the universe that are confusing us.
That would be interesting. Very interesting. They do go back to that. So
Yeah.
another question here. I was thinking about this over time. I wanted to ask you. I fully am not like fully educated in the whole shadow people.
Okay.
So what is the difference between what some would say is known as like a typical ghost and a shadow
Mm.
person?
Oh, I wish you had just asked me or told me your other story, but you'll have to tell me that soon. Okay, let me try to explain what I think. Okay, and I have to stress what I think, um, because I'm not an expert on anything. It's just observations and what I've been able to kind of deduce as a possibility. Um, no one's a paranormal expert, so we just have to try to make sense of what we do have. All right. I actually believe, well, let me preface by saying a lot of people have different views of what shadow people are. Some people think that they're, I've heard time travelers, indigenous spirits, I've heard aliens, I've heard demons, I've heard, um, cryptids, I've heard it all. But what I do think it is it's a ghost, a spirit. I think that there may be other different levels in which phantoms or ghosts manifest. And I think there are two extremes. I think the lowest extreme of a visual manifestation would be either a fog or a wisp of smoke. It's shapeless. It's kind of just iridescent and or smoky, and it just kind of appears, waves, disappears. Or sometimes it could be a fog that moves from one side of the room to the other down a hallway and disappears or something. That would be the lowest form. Then I think the next level up is that it's actually trying to take shape as a human form, but it's maybe sucking in all of the energy around it, and it's coming across as two-dimensional and black and kind of bulky, like it's wearing a toga or a friar's monk. It's not as pronounced as say you or me, right? So that's kind of a shadow. It takes the form of a shadow. I think that's the next level of manifestation as it's trying to show itself. Then the next level would be partial materialization, which would be like maybe tales of people seeing feet but no body, or part of a torso but only half or a part of a person kind of wafting through. I've never seen one of those, but I've heard enough accounts through the years where it's entirely possible. And then the extreme account is a full blown apparition. The extreme manifestation is a full blown apparition. And I actually think that they take on mass because they are solid, because it's not like a hologramic thing where you put your hand and it passes right through them kind of thing. The stories I've heard has more to do with um, being solid in mass where it can actually be touched, and by physics, using what physics laws that we do have that still hold up, is that if it has enough mass, it can cast a shadow as well. And I do believe that it retains mass when it does, and it could be very lifelike. Now, the weird thing about this is that I'm not consciously aware of ever seeing a full blown apparition, but what's to stop me from seeing someone on the streets or in the parking lot or something that was an apparition and I just mistook it as a real person, you know. um you never can tell. I have a great story to tell you, and this is why I think this way. I sold a book to a couple of animators in Burbank, and they're no longer living in this house, but I went to their door and I knocked and I gave them the book and we chatted, and they said that they had just had the wackiest experience in their own neighborhood. And apparently they lived right next to an elderly woman who lived alone, and they would always used to see her in the bathrobe and picking. She was kind of a hermit, And she would be tending her garden, pulling weeds, but would wear a house robe, and they'd say hi, and sometimes she'd wave back and whatnot. It was not They didn't know her that well. Well, they came by one time and they see her out in the yard, and so they go, like that, and she just runs away. And they're like, oh, well, what happened there? What's wrong with that? And then, like a week or two later, there's a knock on the door, and it's the woman's daughter. And she's saying, I'm just calling to let you know that there's going to be a moving truck that's coming by, and we're going to be moving all the stuff out of my mom's house. And they said, well, I hope that, they said, well, I hope that, where's she going? I hope that she's going to, a place that'll look after her, kind of thing. It was kind of like they assumed she was alive. And then that's when the daughter said, no, she died about 3 months ago or something like that. And they did not tell the daughter that, oh, I just saw your mom, and she was acting very strange about a week ago, out in the front yard. They just kind of let that one slide. But yeah, they didn't know it was an apparition that they might have seen. They saw this woman fully formed, and she just didn't make a sound. She just ran away from them. So it makes you wonder about things. I was on the Queen Mary years ago, and I was talking to security, and they told a story about how on a certain level of the deck, they came across someone dressed as a Commodore trying to get inside a room. And they went up to him and said, can I help you, sir? And he goes, yeah, my key doesn't fit the door. And so they said, well, you just stay right here, and we'll go check on it. So they go up a floor to the front desk, and they ask the hotel person there that offering renting the rooms, about this room, that someone, is trying to get in, and the door key isn't working. And she said, well, that's not a functioning room. That's a storage room. So they went, oh, okay, that's weird. So they went downstairs, and the guy's still there trying to get into the cabin. So they said, sir, can you please just come with us? And the guy said, okay. So they're walking, and the guy's right behind them. They turn back to look. Nothing's there. And, so they've never been able to figure that out. They gave me the name of the room, and I looked into the history of it, and that, I believe, was a room in the 60s where this honorary Commodore, that used to be part of the Queen Mary staff, we're talking not 67, we're talking about maybe 70, 71, but those were his living quarters. So what are the odds of that, of having a Commodore who had long been dead, not a real Commodore, but one that they hired to play a Commodore, trying to get into a room that might have used to have been his room, and he couldn't get in, but he was so lifelike that security thought he was the real deal.
See, that like breaks a whole boundary of what ghosts were always seen to be. That they're able to have mass and like really technically be a real person in that moment. That's that's a very crazy thought.
Well, we're still looking into that. I'm on a show called Haunted Discoveries, and with Brandon Alvis, Mustafa, and Kevin, and we go to different locations, and we try to use a more scientific method into it. We do a lot of historical research. That's what my primary role is I really research the heck out of these places ahead of time. And then we line up historians, we line up paranormal people, we interview them, then we go in and try to check the claims. So we're constantly trying to push the boundaries on the data that we collect. And we don't we tend to avoid psychics overall. I mean, not that we don't listen to what they have to say and take what they say into account, but we don't really use them in the investigations themselves. We try to collect data, and I'm still waiting and hoping to see my next ghost, because it's like I just don't see enough of them, you know.
They
It's
keep
so
making them up
rare.
more.
It's so rare. And of course I may live to regret that, what's if I do see one. You never can tell, but part of me is like I get real childlike, I guess, in that the mysteries of the world still very much pique my curiosity. So of course, if a woman in white's supposed to be seen here, or a man wearing a big top hat is seen, I want to see it. I want to see it for myself. Then I can fully believe it. But until then, I want to believe, or I want to be able to disprove it, because I get just as big a thrill out of disproving things as I do it as far as trying to validate. Um, so I'm gonna always be a student of the paranormal. I don't think I'll ever know enough to answer any questions. And to tie back to what you said earlier, is that, yeah, I think there are some things that we're probably never supposed to really know or find out about. It's kind of like peeking through a fence and seeing part of a Rube Goldberg machine at work on the other side. So, you see that and you go, oh, it's a merry-go-round. Then you go to another part of the fence and you peek through and go, no, it looks more like a tractor trailer. It just keeps changing because it's a really big, complex machine that we cannot even understand. But there definitely seem to be some invisible workings behind the scene, whether you want to call it the Matrix or whatever. There's something on the other side that seems to be at work, and could be just one big computer spitting out mathematical formulas. I don't know, but I do believe that the one thing that seems to be a pattern that I've not been able to disprove is that behind every haunted location, there's a historical tie-in somewhere, whether it's a personality of someone that lived there, an event, or something. And it's either connected to the building or it's connected to the ground underneath. There may be exceptions to this. I may change my mind, once with more information, but this seems to be a consistent pattern in investigating.
So we're just about to be out of time, but I will tell the story
Okay,
before
please
time's
do.
up. So talking about like the full mass, that was something I started to believe in. And because of this, one time, this was probably a little over a year ago.
Mm-hmm.
I was driving home, and this was an area that I've never been to in San Antonio. This is probably deep east side. I was on my way home. This was nighttime. This was probably midnight, striking midnight. And there's no one out at this time of day, especially over there. There's no one outside. I'm driving down the back streets, and I hit a stop sign, and I see a person standing in the corner. There's people in the corner all the time. That's just like a typical thing. So I'm there for a little bit, and I just look both sides, and I start going. But then I look to my mirror on the side, and I notice that there's not someone there anymore. And I remember this like going in my head. I was like, at the time, I was thinking to myself, I was probably just not really paying attention, and I just thought I saw somebody. But
Mm-hmm.
as time went on, the more I thought about it, I was thinking like, I turned, I looked straight over there, and I saw a person. So it was just kind of like, you're another situation where your mind is trying to instantly kind of cut it off. She's like, oh, well, it
Right.
was late. It was dark outside. Did you really see someone, or was it just like your mind seeing something and
Mm-hmm.
thinking that's somebody?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think again I would chalk that up to like unresolved, but leans toward you saw something that was paranormal. It's like without the proof and the documentation, it just becomes like just a told story. And I'm not doubting you in the slightest bit, because I've had incidences happen like that with me. And let me just tell you, I'm convinced that what I saw was not a normal person. That was something else. So I would encourage you to, but I think it's always good never to assume what you did by trying to rationalize is actually very normal. It's very healthy. I would encourage it. But sometimes rational thought, you have to be aware that rationalization can be faulty as well. And so you can over rationalize. How many times have we done that? Didn't follow our instinct, rationalized, thought we had it, and it was the worst decision ever, because we overthought. Had we just done what we felt we should have done, it would have probably turned out better than overthinking. How many test scores did you, multiple choice, did you go, hey, and then you go, no, wait a second. There's like, I you erase A and then you pick this really fits it. You put C and then you get marked wrong, and the correct answer was your first answer, A. These are perfect examples of using rational thought to talk you right out of the truth, and right off out of the facts. Second guessing and overthinking. So, I think what you're doing is great, John. I think that, yeah, how does someone just disappear when you look around and look back? You know, um, things do happen like that. A lot of the apparition sightings people say are people that either just disappear like that, they slowly fade away. For whatever reason, you look away and look back and they're gone, and there's no rational reason or even route on where they could have gone to disappear. So yeah, keep your wits about you, and maybe you'll have be able to hone in on these kind of things when they happen.
Who knows? Maybe I'll see a ghost sometime.
Maybe you
Maybe,
have, maybe you
maybe,
have.
maybe all along I have, and it's just been my mind trying to convince me otherwise.
Do I have one time for one quick story or
Yeah, yeah,
not?
definitely,
Okay,
definitely.
this just ties into what you said. Okay, um, I was shooting at the Alexandria Hotel in the top floor of a 1906 historic hotel in downtown Los Angeles, and um, I had fumigated the suite that I was, 1910 suite. It was had fruit flies buzzing everywhere, so I was just going to go down, and I wasn't thinking. It's like 12 floors up, so I go down a floor. And I was just going to take the stairs down to street level, and then I get to the 11th floor, and I'm like, going, "What the heck am I doing?" I better take the elevator. So I press the button, slow wait. The leasing agent told me don't interact with any of the people living in the building because it's low income, but there's a lot of people that will ask questions and hang around and that kind of thing, according to the leasing agent. So I was just going to be as invisible as I can. So I'm standing there waiting, and I see this lady. She's short. She's got a black hat. She's got a black dress. I'm watching her from my peripheral version. She's got a bag, like maybe a plastic or a paper bag, like from a store, and she's hobbling towards me with a cane. And I'm watching her, but I'm not watching her at the same time. You know how you keep people in your peripheral and you're monitoring everything. And I hear her coming towards me, hear her coming towards me, hear her coming towards me. She's right behind me now, and I can't see her. But I heard the rattling of the paper and whatnot. I'm actually even looking my other eye because if she crossed behind me, maybe she's going down that way. No, so the elevator finally arrives and the door opens. And so I make this sweeping Sir Walter Riley gesture of like extending my hand and offering her to get into the elevator first. And I turn around, nobody's there. Nobody's there. And so I started laughing at myself. Go, God, I'm glad someone didn't see this because that's embarrassing when you give this big swooping gesture to offer the elevator to an elderly lady, and yeah, just I offered a free elevator ride to air, nothing. So yeah, things do happen, and then you go away going, was I crazy? The answer is no. I had been watching her for quite a while, but I was doing what I was told, which was like not to let them know and not to interact, with the people living on the floor. Now I think I know why. It's hard to differentiate between who's living there and who lived there once upon a time.
Yeah, that's
But the Alexandria was a very haunted hotel. That's why, or former hotel building. It's now like microlofts for people to live. And, they cater toward people that are low income. Um, so I don't know what generation this woman would have been because she was wearing it could have been any kind of era, really. But, I didn't directly turn and look at her.
yeah, that's like stories like that makes you think like, you're not the only person thinking these kind of things or saying these kind of things. So it
Yeah.
really like pieces your brain more together and believing.
Sharing is scaring.
Hey, that's a
So
good one.
I'm glad that you got to share yours, and I got to share a counter story that's related. And that's how we learn, really, is by sharing and kind of keeping an open mind that there are definitely some things going on in this world that we do not understand. Not even our savviest scientists understand everything.
Well, I really do appreciate you coming on. It was a good time. Me having the little fedora on. I felt like
That's
I was on
right.
TV for a little bit.
Yeah, the Fedora Club. That's what we are.
Yeah.
Well, thanks
Well,
for asking me, John.
of course.
I really appreciate being on the show. I'm a fellow Texan, so it's good to always say hi to, uh, you know, San Antonio, someone in San Antonio. Say hello to the Alamo for me.
I will. I will. Well, thank you. I hope you have a good one.
All right. Take care.
Too. And that's it for today, guys. I know it was a long episode. I don't usually have interviews that long, but we are having a good conversation. Hopefully, you were able to get some conclusion on yourself with that episode. Tune in like always. We'll be back next time. Once again, this has been Getta and Don.